So thank you very much for your welcome, and it's really lovely to be here at your conference, and greetings to everyone from Oxford to you all. And as Dora said this morning, I'd like to talk to you about how mindfulness might help us cope and keep our balance in this increasingly frantic and chaotic world. And I want to especially, as she said, focus on recent developments in the field. We start with a definition so we all know we're on the same page. Mindfulness is about turning the light of awareness towards what's arising outside us and inside us moment by moment, so that we gradually come to see what keeps us locked in our brooding and worry and that sense of being out of balance. And the evidence from hundreds of clinical trials reveal that mindfulness training, most often offered over 8 weeks, as you know, but it can vary, it's effective in freeing ourselves from anxiety and stress and depression and exhaustion. However, those same clinical trials show that not everyone is helped as much as they could be in a single 8-week program. And that's not surprising. 8 weeks goes past very fast. Building a habit of regular practice can be really hard in that short time. And even if we have established a regular mindfulness practice, our lives continue to bring new traumas and pain and disruption and grief, and we can get sort of knocked off balance again by all of this, and also by everyday tasks and worries too, which build up and up as life goes on. So as mindfulness teachers, we are often asked by participants who've completed one mindfulness course, is there anything more I can do to deepen and sustain my practice? And that's what we've been working on over the past few years, and which I want to tell you a little bit about today. And it starts with the observation that emotional problems have certain key characteristics. They hijack our attention, they distract us, they make us grouchy and judgmental, they disturb our equanimity, they make our minds race with over busyness that leaves us exhausted. And in the end, it leaves us joyless and unmotivated. But these moods, although they seem like they come in and stay for a long time, they're actually made up of a series of moments, which if only we could slow things down frame by frame by frame, we'd see the tipping points. Something has arisen, made contact with mind or body, that at that moment is unpleasant or pleasant or neutral. This is called the feeling tone, and it's known in the Buddhist tradition as Vedana. That's what I want to focus on today. There's new psychological science that helps understand the critical role it plays in the creation of distress, much more than we thought before. And so if we can go to the tipping point, we can see a possibility of freedom. Now, if we want to learn how to meet our frantic and chaotic world with kindness and calmness, so we're not pushed and pulled around by these distractions and reactivity, mindfulness of feeling tone offers us a new and creative way to do so. So in this talk, I want to do 4 main things. So there'll be 4 parts to the talk. First of all, I want to say what this feeling tone or Vedana is and why it's important. And second, I want to talk a little bit about how to prepare ourselves for moving in so close to these tipping points. And third, I want to then go towards allowing us to be more aware of feeling tone. How can we do that? And then see how it affects our perception of reality. And lastly, I want to illustrate this with one illustration of what mindfulness of feeling tone can do for other difficulties any of us may experience in daily life. So I've sent over a resource sheet. So some of the things, the books I refer to in this talk, they're there on the resource sheet, as well as a link to the new stuff that we've been doing in Oxford. In each section, in each part, there'll be some explanation, some science, and some practice. So let's start then with part one. What is feeling tone? So feeling tone is the immediate automatic sense that something is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral when you come into contact with it. To illustrate what I mean, see if you can register the feeling tone of a few things I'll list for you in a moment. So all you need to do here is to sense whether and how much these items are pleasant, unpleasant, or somewhere in between. So here they are. You can close your eyes if you like. A smiling child. The smell of a drain. Sunshine after rain. A pile of dirty dishes in the sink. The smell of freshly baked bread. So, could you tell which was pleasant and which unpleasant? Dirty pans, fresh bread? It's not that difficult, is it? But the thing is, did you have to think about it? Probably not. It's feeling tone is that first sense, that immediate sense of whether anything is pleasant or unpleasant, or positive or negative. It's not really an emotion, is it? It's not a pure body sensation either. And it's not a sort of thinking through a judgment of the experience, but it's that instant, automatic, wordless, felt sense of where an experience falls on the spectrum between extremely pleasant through neutral to extremely unpleasant. Smiling child at one end, probably the smell of drains at the other. Not hugely pleasant or hugely unpleasant, but you know what I mean. And you don't need to know how you know. You just know. Somewhere there's a readout, somewhere in mind and body, a gut feeling. It doesn't matter how. It's like the taste of something, bitter or sweet. You just know. You don't have to think about it. And obviously, at the earliest point of the evolution of our species, when there were only single-celled creatures around, even single-celled creatures needed to be sensitive to positive, negative, pleasant, unpleasant, nourishment and toxicity, to move towards the nourishment and away from toxicity, something horrible. So now I gave you some objects there to think about, but you can get your own sense of feeling tone even from the things around you right now. So if you've got a moment, look around the room where you're sitting, and as your eye goes to different objects, see if you can sense the immediate feel of pleasant or unpleasant. And if you like, you could just, if you're for a moment, just look for pleasant things as you look around. And if you like, just put it in the chat. Whatever object you see that feels pleasant, just type it in the chat. And we'll leave the chat open for a minute. And just so we should see in the chat lots of objects coming in to everybody. Flowers in the window. Cup of coffee, a cat, books, picture on your wall, nice books. Yes, me too. Candles, sleeping dog, that's nice. Pillow, picture on the wall. Books, sunshine. You've got a better day in Hungary than we have here in Oxford. It's a bit dull here. Not too bad though. Okay, so handouts on your desk, drawings from your daughter. That's beautiful. So now, okay, so if there's anything as you look around, if there's anything that's not so pleasant, Maybe something, say a book you meant to return to somebody, or a pile of stuff that you haven't sorted out yet. Just notice those too and put those in the chat as well. Your to-do list, aha. I take it, Isabella, that was a negative, not a positive. Anything else slightly unpleasant? Dirty laundry, dirty shoes, dust. Ah, me too. Yeah. List for you too, Dora. Isn't it curious how to-do lists have this thing? A dirty cup? Yeah. So they don't have to be very unpleasant. Papers of unfinished administration. Yeah. It's amazing how those can build up, isn't it? Dirty wall. So we become aware of these things. And you notice that those things there's something general about them, but often they're unique to us too. They're unique. In other words, I couldn't really say, pairless socks, I couldn't really say exactly which ones you would find pleasant or unpleasant. But also notice that they're always there at some level. When you sit in your room, you're on Zoom at the moment, but you sit in your room, they're all around you, and they are, in a sense, still pleasant or unpleasant, even if you're not too aware of them. Now, those are small things maybe, but they illustrate an important thing, that feeling tones are all around us. Everything that makes contact with mind and body has a feeling tone. It can arise and pass away very quickly, so it's difficult to notice without intentionally cultivating awareness of it. And yet, it's critically important because it shapes what happens next. It gives shape to the nature of the mind, the quality of your mood. So if you found just now that some things gave you this pleasant feeling tone, you may also have noticed a sort of just a slight reaction to it. So if your eye rested on a picture or an object, it might have reminded you of someone or something precious, the child who drew the picture, the sleeping dog, and the comfort that a dog can give. And your mind might have just gone off into daydreams or regrets, but then come back. And if you found something that's unpleasant, like the to-do list or the dirty dish, it might have reminded you of something you'd meant to do. And somewhere in your mind, you're running off the thing that you might have meant to do. There's an action started and it has its own momentum. And then you have to sort of draw yourself back. There's a sense of pushing away, resistance. No, I can't do that now. So there's a sort of pushing away. And if there's nothing pleasant nor unpleasant, that can feel a little boring. It can feel like, nothing to look at here. You tune out. You get a little bored, and maybe you would end up hoping that this lecturer from Oxford would hurry up and get on to the next thing. Come on, get to the main point. Now, these reactions are really important to notice, because without our being aware of it, an unpleasant sensation or a pleasant sensation may tip our mood in one direction or the other. And the way it tips the mood can affect the next and the next and the next mood and ruin our whole day or make our whole day pleasant. So here's an important thing. The feeling tone of any moment can be the tipping point for the quality of the next moment. Now, every sensational thought has a feeling tone, as we've said, but the feeling tone can't be changed. It just comes to the territory. But the reactions in the very next moment are changeable. So mindfulness awareness, the feeling tone of experience, offers a point of entry into those habitual cycles of reactivity that occur in our emotional distress. If we were able to cultivate greater awareness of feeling tone, it would have enormous potential. We'd have early warning signs of impending impulses, thoughts, and emotional reactions, and therefore more choice about how best to respond. There's a famous mindfulness teacher in America called Joseph Goldstein, and he has said that mindfulness of feeling tone is one of the master keys, a master key that both reveals and unlocks the deepest patterns of our conditioning. So, if we want to deepen our mindfulness practice, to free ourselves from the moods that afflict us, cultivating awareness of feeling tone provides an important key. And new psychological findings are also helping us understand what this feeling tone's impact is. They show that although some things like very sudden loud noises or looming objects seem to be inherently unpleasant, most of our sense of what is pleasant or unpleasant comes from our past conditioning. This conditioning is sometimes very subtle, sometimes more obvious, but it makes it hard to predict which things will strike you or me as pleasant or unpleasant. You have to be aware of how you are finding it now and how it might be entangling you in attachment or aversion. But where should we start with all this? If we're going to begin an 8-week journey into this new territory, new practices that invite us to be open to this past conditioning, get up very close to it, it might be very powerful. It's important to put some foundations in place. And so I want to move to part 2 now. I want to talk about preparing ourselves for moving in close to feeling tone. If we know now what feeling tone is, and I'll come back to it later, how do we move in close? How do we prepare ourselves for moving in close? Because it's bound to bring us really very close to potentially unpleasant things. Well, there are 2 things that we can do to prepare, and these are practiced first. The first is to find our ground, to explore possible anchors for attention to come back to if we get distressed or distracted. Now, traditionally in meditation, as you'll know, the breath is the major thing we use as the anchor to come back to stabilize the mind when it goes away. But for some people, the breath is not so helpful, either because some people have problems in breathing, they tendency to panic when they focus on the breath, but also during COVID, the breath became a very complicated place to use as an anchor. And for other people, the breath it doesn't provide a strong enough signal against all the noise of the mind. And David Treleaven, in his 2018 book, Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness, it's on the resource list, he suggests a number of strategies we can use to deal with such moments. He reminds us there's no need to grit our teeth and meditate through a difficulty. And we can let go of the meditation completely if we choose and come back to it later. And he explores different anchor points, not only the breath, but also the feet, the contact with the seat or the mat or the hands. And this means that every time you sit down to meditate or lie down, you can get a sense of which of these places in the body provide for you at that moment the strongest signal to return to when your mind is very distracted and noisy. Now we're going to practice this in a moment. But before we do, we note there's a second way of handling mind wandering and distractions. And this is to build a different relationship with them. What do we mean by this? Well, when we anchor our attention in meditation, when we come back to the breath or whatever, we often find our mind wanders. And it's easy to believe that what took us away, it might be planning the future or remembering something we meant to do. It's easy to think that when we sit and meditate, that all that mind wandering is somehow the enemy, that it's interfering with our practice, that if only we could stop our mind wandering, then we'd be able to start meditating. And you find yourself rushing back to the breath as if something's gone wrong. But what if we could see that this distraction and mind wandering is not an enemy at all to be got rid of, but the very thing we need to practice on? So here's another way to think of it. If you, I don't know about you, but often we register for gym membership. Yeah, we become a member of a gym because we want to keep fit. What if we registered for the gym and we turned up on the first day to find that the gym was completely empty, no equipment, nothing to sort of, push and pull and pedal and stuff like that. No bikes, no cross trainer, nothing, no rowing machines. You'd be pretty annoyed. You want to say, well, look, I paid all my money. I want to have all that equipment to practice on, to exercise on. Now, think of your minds like that. If you had a clear and empty mind, it'd be like walking into the empty gym, nothing to practice on. So when you meditate, you put yourself in a situation, sitting quietly, and then the gymnasium equipment comes to you, a thought, an image, a memory, a plan. That's like a rowing machine, a cross trainer, a running machine. All these things that feel like interfering, they're all distractions which we can use in our practice. Mindfulness training is not a clever way to get rid of all these things. We need the mind's activity to practice on. The mind is doing what it does. It brings us things to solve. It brings us problems to solve from yesterday, last week, last year, and it's doing the best it can. So when our mind has wandered, we can develop another relationship with the mind, kindness, appreciation, even wonder for everything it does for us. We're not coming back to our anchor of the breath or the body because a mistake has been made, but because by coming back again and again, there's a chance to witness it moving away again. Then, by turning the light of awareness at that very moment we realize we've slipped anchor, we can see the mind at work. And this seeing helps us stand back a little. We call it decentering. It's cultivating a different relationship with the mind based on befriending the mind, a relationship of understanding and kindness. And so the very thing we thought was the enemy for our practice turns out to be the means to help us train the mind and heart. So I want to pause now and do a short meditation together so we can get a taste of finding our ground and then viewing mind wandering as something to practice on. So if you're up for this, if not, don't worry, you can turn the camera on or leave it off if you like. And if you want to close your eyes, that's also fine. And noticing your seat on the chair as you sit here, noticing your whole body, hands on the lap, feet on the floor, the whole body sitting here breathing, allowing the shoulders to drop, the facial expression to be soft. And when you're ready, gathering your attention and allowing your attention to focus on your feet, contacting the floor. And noticing all the sensations that are here when your attention arrives. It might be tingling, vibration, whatever it is, seeing if you can be open to it right now, moment by moment. The toes, soles of the feet, the heels. And now including the top of the feet as well, until you're holding both feet center stage in awareness. And now taking a deeper breath, and on the out breath, letting go of the feet and shifting your attention to the contact with the chair that you're sitting on. Buttocks and thighs on the chair, perhaps the lower back. Noticing what sensations there are here. sense of pressure, contact. Seeing if it's possible to tune in to the changing sensations moment by moment. Then taking a deeper breath, and on the out breath, letting go of the contact with seat and shifting your attention to your hands, resting on your lap or thighs, fingers and thumbs, palms and backs. What's here? Then taking a deeper breath, letting go of your hands and coming to one place where you feel the breath moving. It may be the nose, the nostrils, or the chest, or the abdomen around the navel. And just settling in here for a few moments. Sensations of breathing. And now making a choice either to stay with the breath as your anchor or to return to the feet or the contact with seat or the hands. So making a choice now. Which anchor for you today gives you a sense of grounding? Feet, seat, hands, or breath? And if your mind wanders away from your anchor, then instead of coming back straight away to your anchor, just taking a pause and thanking the mind, appreciating the mind. It's doing the best it can. And when you've thanked the mind, kindness to the mind, only then slowly coming back to your anchor. And now, when you're ready, beginning to move fingers and toes, allowing your eyes to open if they've been closed, coming back, taking the room again. So maybe if you want to just take a minute to put in the chat what you found you chose for your anchor. Was it the breath? Was it the feet, seat? What was it you chose? And is there anything else you noticed? Put that in the chat as well. We'll keep the chat open for a minute or two now. So feel free to put in the chat. So somebody found the breath was the anchor. Feet, hands, breath, the seat, hands touching each other. The breath, hands, and snuggie. It's my hands, Ali's feet. Adrienne, breath. And when your mind wandered, was there any sense of thanking the mind? That sense of, rather than rushing back to the breath, but just, taking a pause and really noticing the mind is working really hard here. So sort of befriending the mind, appreciating the mind. Thank you. Thank you for those. So notice how varied they were, how much it can be a very interesting discovery, because we can think, oh, it's always got to be the breath, but actually there's lots of other things we can use as an anchor. So we've begun to stabilize the mind, finding our ground, beginning to relate differently to its wandering, instead of thinking that the wandering a mistake, actually thanking the mind instead. So now we're ready to move on to part 3. And in part 3, we consider how feeling tone affects our perception of reality. Okay, so we've seen that feeling tone is this tipping point that can create cascades of reactivity that may cause us distress sometimes. And that's because it affects how we perceive things. And neuroscience research suggests that the mind works by something called predictive processing. And there's something on the resource sheet, some books that you can read if you want to follow this up. But if you just Google predictive processing or predictive coding, you'll get there. And these new findings show that every waking moment, the brain is constantly active. And what's it doing? It's making predictions on the basis of what's happened in the past, recent or remote. And it builds out of these predictions a sequence of mental models that help us interpret our world and decide what action to take next. Now, what are these mental models? How should we understand them? Well, here's a story that might help us. I was with my mother-in-law some time ago, and she's 91 years old, but she likes to keep up with the latest tech. And at one point, she made a sound of exasperation. She said, "Oh, it's happened again." She was referring to her iPad. She likes the fact that it takes photographs, but sometimes it's a bit too clever because it sometimes takes multiple pictures. If you hold on the button too long, it takes lots of pictures. It's called a photo burst. And she does this by accident. She doesn't want to take multiple photo bursts. And she only later realizes that she's captured 15 near identical pictures of her chair or her lap or the wall across from where she is sitting. So mental models are a bit like a photo burst, a series of images, one after the other. But there's a difference. The camera is taking a series of pictures frame by frame of what is actually there. But the pictures in your mental models aren't like this. Imagine that the first image in the series was based on data from the world, but the pictures that follow later in the sequence gradually are internally generated based on matching that first image with similar images from your own past. So as the mental photo burst unfolds, a sort of the images may be updated by comparing the internal images with actual data from your senses now, but they may not be. Because if the actual data being taken in by your brain now isn't strong enough or precise enough to contradict the photo burst, your conscious experience will just be the internally generated pictures in your mind, not what you are actually perceiving. It's as if we have two parallel streams in the brain. One is the basic data stream that's monitoring the actual world. The other is a virtual video stream. And this virtual stream, the rapid sequence of mental models, is constructed from predictions of what is likely to happen from one moment to the next based on what's happened in the past. Now, because the mental models are based on what happened in the past, they include the positive and negative consequences of past actions. That is, the feeling tones. This means that all our past conditioning about what's pleasant and what's unpleasant is summarized in the feeling tone of any moment. That's why it's so important. And the sequence of later mental models are affected by the earlier feeling tone in the sequence. So it takes your mood up or down without you knowing it until it's too late. So what happens when you're not aware of the feeling tones? You end up reacting to them, being pushed and pulled around by the subtle and unnoticed pleasantness or unpleasantness of passing thoughts, feelings, and body sensations. An unpleasant sensation or thought, the mind gets into a mode of resistance, of pushing away. But the pushing away is itself unpleasant. That has an unpleasant feeling tone. So that cascades into the next moment too. And what past condition can be seen when pleasant things occur? Well, we can often become attached and want more of pleasantness, but actually it doesn't always happen. You may realize that when something happens to you that's pleasant, often you want to damp it down so as not to be disappointed. If a child comes up and says, "Oh, I've been picked for the school team," isn't that, as a parent, you often say, "Oh no, what if tomorrow it's what if they really haven't been picked, or what if it goes?" So you try to damp down the child's potential disappointment. So, or if something good happens to you, you can say, "I don't deserve to be happy," or "If I enjoy this moment, something will go wrong." With practice, however, we can begin to catch the feeling tones and see how they're feeding into our mental models. So I want to try this now for a couple of minutes. And instead of our eyes ranging around the room, I want us to just close our eyes, noticing our anchors as we did before, and then just noticing what's pleasant and unpleasant in our inner selves, in our body sensations and sounds and thoughts. So let's just sit for a couple of minutes now. And start by just coming to our anchors. So the feet on the floor, seat on the chair, hands, or the breath. Spending a few moments here, anchoring, grounding ourselves. And now expanding our attention to the body as a whole, sitting here. So all the sensations in the body from the crown of the head to the bottom of the feet. And as we do so, noticing what sensations there are in the body, and noticing now their pleasantness or unpleasantness, noticing their feeling tone. Are they pleasant, unpleasant, or neither? If it's difficult to tell, just let it go and wait for another sensation to come. Maybe extending this to sounds as well. If there are sounds inside the body, outside the body, inside the room, outside the house, outside the building, are they pleasant, unpleasant, or somewhere in between? And if you're having any thoughts going through your mind or emotions, are these pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, somewhere in between? Okay, so opening our eyes now. So that was just a little sample of a meditation that can be extended 10 minutes, 20 minutes, where you just start with the grounding, you then go to the whole body, and then noticing the feeling tones of the body, the sensations, then extending to sounds, then extending to thoughts and feelings. Really, but zooming in on the feeling tone and reactions to them. Now, one thing that, if we start to notice feeling tones, is that very often they're so fast that it's really important to allow them to be seen. And one way of doing this, if it's pleasant, is to say inwardly, it's okay to like this. This helps dissolve the reactivity. We can enjoy it while it's here. We're not trying to attach ourselves, make it last any longer. We're just saying it's okay to like this if something's pleasant. And similarly, if it's unpleasant, after we've acknowledged it, unpleasant, we could say inwardly, it's okay not to like this. It's okay not to like it. So if you've got a pain in the head, you're not saying it's okay to have a pain, but you're saying it's okay not to like this pain. So whatever the feeling tone is, the feeling tone is giving you information. It's okay to sense this information. It's okay not to like this. And this dissolves the reactivity by helping us see that it's natural not to like unpleasant things. So I want to just extend the practice now that we just started by adding these little instructions. And we'll do this by doing a little bit of simple stretching. So notice when we do any stretches, we can carry on sitting down. Don't overstretch. It's that, just do what you can. But what I'd like you to do is to notice sensations and the feeling tone of sensations as we do some very simple stretching. And we're just going to do some very slow shoulder movements, if you can and if you want to. If not, just sit it out. You can put your camera off if you like when you do this. But the first thing is just to move your shoulders up as if they wanted to cover your ears, like this. And then when you're in that position, you've created some sensations probably. You've probably got some sensations around under the shoulders and in the neck. And notice the feeling tone. Is it pleasant or unpleasant? And if it's unpleasant at all, just add inwardly, say inwardly to yourself, it's okay not to like this. So if it's unpleasant, it's okay not to like this. Noticing the feeling tone, sensations, saying it's okay. And then move the shoulders back as if the shoulder blades wanted to touch behind your head. And again, is it pleasant or unpleasant? Noticing the feeling tone of the sensations. And if it's pleasant, saying it's okay to like it. And if it's unpleasant, saying it's okay not to like it. Then letting the shoulders drop. Let the shoulders drop and relax. And once again, if there's something pleasant here about these sensations, saying it's okay to like this. And then moving the shoulders forward. And again, is it pleasant or unpleasant? What are these sensations being created? If it's pleasant, saying it's okay to like it. If it's unpleasant, it's okay not to like it. No overstretching required, just noticing. Holding it for a few more moments to notice the feeling tone. And then put that into a shoulder roll. So you're rolling the shoulders in one direction or the other, it doesn't matter which direction. And notice the changing sensations as you roll the shoulders around. And notice how the feeling tone changes as well. Sometimes slightly more pleasant, perhaps sometimes slightly unpleasant. See if you can cultivate this sense if it's okay to allow it to be just what I find it to be. If it's pleasant, that's okay. And then changing the direction of the movement, continuing to tune in. And at a certain point, just coming to stillness and noticing the after effects. Noticing the after effects. And as you sit here, facial expression soft, shoulders relaxed and dropped. Noticing what's going on in your body right now. And if there's any sense of pleasantness, allowing pleasant sensations, allowing the sensations that have this pleasant feeling tone by saying it's okay to like this. And sometimes there are sensations which are not so pleasant, which are unpleasant. If you notice these, acknowledge them. This is unpleasant. And then adding inwardly, it's okay not to like this. It's natural not to like this. It's okay. Same thing with thoughts if they come up, or feelings. Are they pleasant or unpleasant? And if they're pleasant, it's okay to like them. Saying inwardly, it's okay. And if they're unpleasant, acknowledging these two are unpleasant. And then adding, it's natural. It's okay not to like this. It's okay. It's okay. In this way, cultivating kindness for the mind and the body, befriending the mind, the body. Coming home. And so now, very gradually begin to move fingers and toes, allowing the eyes to open if they've been closed and taking in the room and the surroundings again. Okay. So let's take just a couple of minutes then to reflect on what we noticed in this practice, any discoveries or difficulties. And once again, we'll open the chat. So if you want to, put a word or a phrase in the chat to convey anything you noticed in that short meditation on feeling tone and allowing feeling tone. If you don't want to put it in the chat, maybe just reflect on it or write a note to yourself in your journal or book. Curiosity. Thanks, Adina. Curiosity is a great ally in mindfulness practice, isn't it? The sense of really wanting to know what's going on, wanting to cultivate awareness. Calmness of mind. Thanks, Martina. The calming effect. It's interesting how calming sometimes comes out of the insight we get when we look for feeling tones. The validation of feelings, sense of these feelings are okay. They're giving us a message. We need to hear their message. And the variety of feeling tones in your shoulder was amazing. Thanks, Nidra. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your names wrong. Silence inside your mind. Yeah. Sympathy, compassion, the physical movement, so that the rolling of the shoulders help to be present. Yeah. That sense of grounding in the body rather than being lost in the head, it can be extraordinarily helpful, can't it? Acceptance, gratitude, wholeness, feeling at ease. Just moving in close up to these tipping points, the gratitude, the wholeness, the sense of befriending the mind, absolutely felt like the easing of pain. It's curious, thanks to this, the sense of the easing of pain that comes from allowing the discomfort, because there's pain and there's the feeling tone of the pain. And often it's the feeling tone, the unpleasantness of it that gets us really hooked in. The pain itself often comes and goes, but we don't see it coming and going because peak pain gets captured in the mental models. So the peak pain just cascades forward. So in your body, absolutely. So Esther says she has pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, different parts of the body. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, you can in different parts of the body. And of course, they happen very fast, so they can come in quick succession as well. So Dora talks about more awareness of the body, discovering what's pleasant and unpleasant. These things that often we don't notice very much. Acceptance, thanks Lisa, awareness. It's, yeah, noticing the difference between stretch and relaxation in the shoulders. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? The sense in which it's different in its nature of sensations, but it's also different in the feeling tone of sensations. And feeling tone, of course, it's there in all our mindfulness courses. Feeling tones are there in the background. This idea of pleasant and unpleasant. But in our normal courses, we don't have a meditation which focuses directly on them. We mostly focus on the reactions to them, the sort of the cascade of reactivity. But what we're doing in this new approach to deepen practice is to move right upstream to the very tipping point. So thanks for all of those comments. Those are really, really helpful. So in this final part, this is part 4 now we're moving to. I want to give one example of how psychological science can reveal how feeling tone affects our behavior that's common for many of us. I want to focus on joylessness, because that's really hard to bear when we're stressed, depressed, or exhausted. It's the fact that many of the things that we used to enjoy stop being enjoyable, so we give them up. Might be singing in a choir, playing our instruments, going out for a drink with friends, walking, doing exercise. We give them up. And at the same time, many routine activities get left undone. It's almost as if somebody's turned off your motivation switch. And often this pattern comes when we're depressed, but it may feel very familiar to many of us, even in daily life. And that's because the same dampening of motivation happens whenever we are busy and driven to finish tasks. And this is why. It turns out that the mind has a very natural and well-tuned mechanism for helping you focus on something you need to do, a project that you're trying to finish. It simply damps down the attractiveness of alternative activities. So the result is that when you're working hard and really focused, you become less interested in doing other things. Hobbies may stop feeling rewarding, other businesses left undone. And here's the thing, the more enjoyable the hobby used to be, the more it needs to be suppressed to allow you to focus on this project. You know, if you're finishing an assignment for work or for college, you need to suppress all the alternatives. And the more pressing the other business you have to get to abandon to get the project done, the more it also needs to be suppressed to allow you to focus. It can be a bit of a battle at first, but if the project wins, the dampening allows you to get on with it without distraction. The mind has done its job. But when the project is finished, the things you've successfully suppressed aren't easy to revive. the suppression has done its work, and even after the stress has gone, it's hard to get the zest back into life, or because the mind inhibits some actions in order to allow others to get priority. And it doesn't need to be a big project for this process to be activated in the mind. Just getting through everyday life produces a similar effect, because everyday activities often need this sort of juggling. You can't do everything that you'd like to every day. You have to put some things off in order to do other things. And probably the most common example is what in English we call procrastination. It's putting off what needs to be done. Procrastination is waiting for the right time for a task and then making the painful discovery that the right time doesn't come. It's like taking that library book back. It's never the right time to take library books back. Have you ever noticed that? And most of us do procrastinate pretty much every day for some things, but for some of us it can become quite an issue. But what if procrastination was like a new piece of gym equipment in the gymnasium? We could hold it in mindful awareness and take a close look at it. And it turns out that it links with feeling tone in a very subtle way. Because laboratory research has found that the very act of pushing away increases unpleasant feeling tone. So there's a psychologist called Jane Raymond, and her team at Bangor University asked participants to do a computer task where they had to focus in the middle of the screen to do the task, but there were also distractors. So they had to inhibit the distractor in order to do the task. And they found something really fascinating. The distractors came to be seen as more negative. They lost pleasantness in their feeling tone. What's more, if the distractor was near to the center of the screen, so it took more effort to suppress it, these materials became more negative than distractors that were on the edge of the screen that didn't need so much effort to push them away. So when you procrastinate, that library book that you meant to take back, every time you think of it, or every time you pass that book and say, no, not now, you push it away. You have to sort of push it to one side. And that library book ends up feeling more and more negative. And getting it to the library seems more and more unpleasant. The task hasn't changed at all in itself. The library book is still sitting there, poor old book, but it's acquired a more unpleasant taste. And the longer we put it off, the worse the taste becomes, because we've pushed it away more often. Each pushing away reduces pleasantness and ratchets up the unpleasantness. And this happens through no fault of our own, nor the fault of the task. That's still the same as it was last week or last month. But in our mind, it's more negative and harder to do. Can you think of a task like that? Something you've been putting off and now seems bigger or more difficult? Maybe we'll open the chat for a minute or two and put in the chat if you think. You don't have to reveal all your secrets, by the way. Nobody's really looking, apart from, 160 odd people. But if you want to just put in the chat now, anything that comes to mind that you've been putting off. Admin. Thanks, Anna-Marie. Yeah, a very favourite, I think, for most of us. And you notice the longer you put it off, it doesn't get any easier, like it actually grows up. Homework, analysis, your therapy, video recording. Oh, yes. According to the MBCT or MBTK, hard luck. Yeah. Thesis, cleaning. Yeah. Responding to emails, a very common one. And interesting to think that just this sense of pushing them away actually makes them more negative. It actually makes them, the feeling tone, more unpleasant. Administration things, thanks. Packing for your flight tomorrow. Oh, have a good flight. Sorting out photos, washing. Photos, you can put those off for years, can't you? Visiting the doctor. it's a really important discovery that procrastination is common. And there's no need to worry if it happens to you because it's so common. But if it starts to bother you, see if you can bring it intentionally into the laboratory of your practice. Let's try this now for a couple of minutes. So coming to sit, closing your eyes and finding your anchor to start with. So the feet, seat, hands, or breath. And then expanding your attention to the body as a whole, sitting here. All the sensations in the body. And then bringing to mind one thing that you've been putting off. And allowing it to rest on the workbench of the mind. And noticing how it's affecting the body and noticing its feeling tone. Really allowing the feeling tone to speak, to be sensed. And if it's unpleasant in any way, saying inwardly, it's natural, it's okay not to like this. It's okay not to like this. Appreciating what the mind has been doing to allow you to focus on some things by inhibiting other things. And now, here's the feeling tone of it. It's okay. Okay, allowing the eyes to open. And just registering for a moment how it feels. The things we've been putting off. And see if we can bring this sense of kindness that we've been talking about. So in this way, we can use our mindfulness practice to help sense the feeling tone more clearly. This bringing awareness to the feeling tone, seeing it, allowing it, gives us just a little more space, a little more kindness towards ourselves. And then on things like we've been meaning to do, without pushing yourself, just see what happens. Just bring these things into your practice, and then without pushing, just see what happens the next time you need to do that. So if you wish to explore any of this further, the resources page, which Dora has put in the chat, links to an article in the journal Mindfulness called What Next After MBSR, MBCT. It gives a link to a book that's coming out in May called Deeper Mindfulness by myself and Danny Penman, which is a successor book to Mindfulness in the Frantic World. So let's just summarize. Let's just summarize to finish off with. We've been exploring how to extend what mindfulness practice can reveal to us by seeing how our understanding of the world is colored by feeling tone. We've suggested that if feeling tone is not seen clearly, it presses our buttons. Left to itself, it automatically creates a pulse of reactivity, resistance against what we don't like, or pursuit of what we do like, or sometimes a dampening of the positive to avoid disappointment. Feeling tone is so easily missed, yet it is the very tipping point for reactivity that can do so much damage to ourselves and our relationships. The feeling tone and the reaction is incorporated into this series of mental models, and they can be hard to correct with new data. By slowing things down, and looking frame by frame by frame, moment by moment by moment, we can bring this process into the light of awareness. We can dissolve the link between the feeling tone and the reactivity that would have followed it. We then remain open to the actuality of what is here, rather than caught up in a virtual world that doesn't serve us very well. And there are meditations that we can do to help us explore this feeling tone. And our research has shown that this program is effective. People who have meditated for years and years, who've been mindfulness teachers for years and years, when they've done this program, they find themselves appreciating more of the pleasant moments and dealing more skillfully with what had been distressing them. Anxiety goes down, stress goes down, depression goes down, even more than their mindfulness practice has been enabling to do up till now. It seems that by committing ourselves to deepen and extend our practice through feeling tone in this way, this revealing and unlocking, and we reveal our past conditioning and we unlock ourselves from our past conditioning. It was there 2,500 years ago in the ancient Buddhist tradition. But now with this new way, with science showing that it is absolutely critical. It can be revealed for any of us in our lives right now. So we are going to finish this session quite soon. If there's anything you would like to put in the chat now that you haven't already, do feel free to put it, and then maybe we'll just sit for the last couple of minutes. We have about 4 minutes left, I think, before we have to move on with your conference. So if there's something you want to put in the chat, do put it in now, and then we'll finish with a couple of minutes of sitting. Does that sound like a plan? Okay, so the title of the new book with Danny Penman is called Deeper Mindfulness. Deeper Mindfulness comes out in May. Deeper Mindfulness. And the American mindfulness practitioner mentioned earlier was David Treleaven. So let's just, we have 1 minute, I think, and I then will leave you to have the rest of your day. Shall we just sit for 1 minute? So coming to sit and letting your eyes close if that feels comfortable, or lowering your gaze. And once again, noticing your chosen anchor point, the feet, or contact with seat, hands, or the breath. Of course, you can use some combination if you choose. But whatever you choose, just receiving the sensations from this place, wherever your attention rests lightly, receive the sensations that are gifted to you, moment by moment. And perhaps making an intention, forming an intention to continue to befriend the mind in this way. Noticing, being curious, bringing a sense of kindness and friendship to this mind, this body, as you continue to live your life from day to day, moment to moment. So now beginning to move, letting the eyes open, and have a good meeting. I will say goodbye and thank you very much for your attention.
Dear Mark, thank you very much for sharing your ideas with us. And it was really, really fascinating, and to get an insight into this very new way of mindfulness. And may I just can have one question that am I understand you well that this deeper mindfulness is built on the original MBCT procedure, the 8-week procedure, So first, would you suggest to do the MBCT procedure, and then if someone wants to deepen his or her attitude and knowledge, then this deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been written as a follow-on program for those who've done MBSR or MBCT, or mindfulness in some other way. But our research shows that it's also good for novices as well. So we've written it as a follow-on program, but we included some people who actually didn't have much mindfulness experience, and they also got benefit from it. Okay. And yes, somebody said, could you use anchoring at the beginning of every practice? Yes, I think probably that's a very good thing to do. So yeah, thank you so much. And it's been lovely to see you all. And thank you for all your comments and being prepared to share with others too, and to tolerate English as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we wish you a lot of successes and new experiences. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.